It was just past midnight when my phone began to buzz violently on the nightstand. I was in a hotel room 2 cities away, lying under the comfort of crisp, white sheets after a long business trip. The sound startled me out of deep sleep, and at first, I thought it was an emergency. Only a family member or close friend would dare to call at that hour. With a groggy hand, I reached for the phone. But the name on the screen made my stomach drop. HOA Karen. Yes, that Karen. The neighbor who had crowned herself the unofficial ruler of the homeowners association, a woman who thrived on power trips and made life miserable for anyone she could control. For months, she'd harassed me about landscaping, mailbox paint, even the shade of my curtains, as if it were her divine duty to regulate my existence. I debated ignoring it. But then I remembered how vindictive she could be. If I didn't answer, she would probably plaster complaints across the HOA forum, accuse me of negligence, or worse, send some emergency violation notice that would cost me hundreds of dollars. So, with a heavy sigh, I swiped to answer. Hello. My voice cracked with fatigue. Her voice shot through the speaker, sharp and shrill. Finally. Do you realize how long I've been calling? You should really be more responsive. As a homeowner in this community, you are required to be reachable at all hours. I sat up, confused. Karen, it's past midnight. Is there an actual emergency? Oh, it's an emergency, all right, she snapped. There are contractors here waiting to perform some urgent work on your property, and they need access. Where are the keys? I blinked, trying to process. Contractors. At midnight. At my property. None of this made sense. Karen, I said slowly, first of all, I didn't authorize any contractors. Second, I'm in another city. Third, what on earth makes you think I'd hand over my keys to you or anyone at this hour? She gasped like I had insulted royalty. Excuse me. This is not a request, it's an obligation. As the head of the HOA Compliance Committee, I have the right to ensure all properties meet the standards. And your property, well, frankly, it's a disgrace. Those shutters. Peeling. That lawn. Patchy. We voted last week that you needed improvements. I found contractors, and they're ready now. You need to drive here immediately and provide access. At that moment, I couldn't decide whether to laugh or scream. She genuinely believed I should drive 3 hours in the dead of night, just so she could boss around some unsuspecting workers. Karen, I said, trying to stay calm, this is insane. You have no right to send contractors to my property without my permission. And you absolutely don't have the authority to demand my keys. If you touch my house, it's trespassing. Do you understand that? Her tone turned venomous. You'd better watch how you speak to me. I am the HOA. If you refuse, I'll issue daily fines, and by the time you're back in town, you'll owe thousands. Do you want that? And that was the moment I realized, this wasn't just a power trip. This was harassment, possibly even extortion. The call didn't end the way I thought it would. Most people, after being told no at midnight, would realize how ridiculous they were and hang up. But not Karen. She doubled down. You think you're clever, don't you? She hissed, her words coming through the phone like venom. But I've already told the contractors to wait. They drove their trucks here, they're on the clock, and someone is paying for it. If you don't come give them access, I'll have the HOA file a lien against your property for wasting association funds. I rubbed my temples. I could feel a headache brewing, the kind that throbs behind the eyes. Karen, let me make this very clear. I did not hire those contractors. If you took it upon yourself to bring them here, that's your problem. And if you're spending HOA money without community approval, then you're the one who's going to have to explain it to the board, and maybe even a judge. There was a pause. A long, icy silence. Then she let out a laugh, but it wasn't a funny one. It was that smug, superior kind of laugh, the kind that says I have power and you don't. "Oh, sweetheart," she said in a mocking tone, "you really don't know how things work, do you? I am the board. I run the meetings. I set the agenda. No one questions me. And by the time you drag your tired self back here, all the work will be done and billed to your account. You'll pay up, or you'll be drowning in penalties. Either way, I win." That was it. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just overstepping, she was abusing her position in the HOA. I glanced at the time on my phone, 12:37 a.m. My business trip had me up at 5 a.m. the next day. I needed rest, not this nonsense. But if I hung up now, she'd keep calling, or worse, she'd try to break in. "Karen, listen carefully," I said, lowering my voice. "If you set foot on my property without my permission, I'll call the police. If those contractors try to enter my house, they'll be trespassing. And if you misuse HOA funds, I'll file a formal complaint with the county. This is your warning." She gasped like a Victorian duchess who'd just been insulted at a tea party. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, I'd absolutely dare," I said, my patience snapping. "And believe me, you're not nearly as untouchable as you think." Before she could spit out another threat, I ended the call. My thumb hovered over the block number option, but I stopped. No. I needed her calls. I needed her voicemails, her texts, her threats recorded as evidence. Sure enough, within minutes, the messages started flooding in. Mobile phone text 1, "You're making a huge mistake. I'll make sure every single board member is against you." Mobile phone text 2, "Daily fines start tomorrow. You'll be bankrupt in months." Mobile phone text 3, "If you cared about this community, you'd cooperate. Selfish people like you ruin neighborhoods." I let them pile up, screenshotting each one. My folder of evidence was growing, and it would come in handy soon. Then, just as I thought she was done, the phone rang again. Against my better judgment, I answered. This time, her voice was shriller, like she'd been pacing and working herself up. "The contractors are here, and they're impatient. Either you give me permission to access your property right now, or I'll have them break the lock." Don't think I won't. I sat up straight in bed, my blood running cold. Break the lock. That was no longer HOA drama, that was breaking and entering. "Karen," I said firmly, "let me explain something to you. My property is private. It does not belong to the HOA, it does not belong to you, and you do not have authority over it. If anyone damages my lock, I'll press charges against them and you personally. Do you understand? That's criminal activity." She scoffed, as if the law didn't apply to her. "Oh, please. The police won't bother with something like this. I have influence. I know the mayor's cousin. Do you really think they'll take your side over mine?" I nearly laughed at the absurdity. The mayor's cousin. This wasn't a political thriller, this was a suburban street with cookie-cutter houses. But Karen really believed her imagined power shielded her from consequences. At that moment, I knew I had two choices. Ignore her and risk her actually carrying out her threat. Get proactive and make it clear she couldn't get away with this. I chose option 2. "Karen," I said evenly, "I'm done talking. If you or anyone else sets foot on my property tonight, I'll make one phone call, and there will be squad cars on the street in minutes. And since you're admitting this on the phone, I'll make sure the recording is turned over to law enforcement. Consider yourself warned. She sputtered. You wouldn't dare record me. But the truth was, I didn't have to record her directly. The dozens of threatening texts she had sent me in just the last half hour were enough to bury her in trouble. For the first time that night, Karen didn't have a comeback. Instead, she hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. I lay back against the pillows, heart still pounding. I wanted to believe it was over, but something told me Karen wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. And I was right. By the time dawn broke, I hadn't slept more than an hour. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined Karen marching up my driveway, waving a clipboard, dragging her contractors behind her like soldiers. When I finally sat up, groggy and aching, my phone was blinking with notifications. I braced myself, unlocking it. 12 missed calls. 7 voicemails. 14 new texts. All from Karen. I scrolled through them, one by one. Mobile phone voicemail 1, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Just cooperate and save yourself the trouble. Mobile phone voicemail 3, if you don't answer, I'll have no choice but to escalate this matter to the board. And believe me, they'll side with me. Mobile phone voicemail 6, fine. Be stubborn. Don't say I didn't warn you when you're knee-deep in legal fees. And then, the kicker, mobile phone voicemail 7, the contractors are billing the HOA for the wasted trip. I'm adding the invoice to your account. Expect a fine notice in your mailbox when you get back. That one made me sit bolt upright. She wasn't bluffing. She was actually trying to stick me with a bill for contractors I never hired, at an hour no sane person would schedule work. I knew then this wasn't just harassment. It was fraud. Later that morning, while I sat in my hotel room sipping bitter coffee, I got another notification. This time, it wasn't a call or a text. It was an email from the HOA office. The subject line, urgent violation and assessment notice. I opened it, and sure enough, there it was in bold, official-looking formatting. Dear homeowner, it has come to our attention that you have refused access to necessary contractors for urgent property improvements mandated by the HOA board. As a result, the association has incurred unnecessary costs. Per community guidelines, you are responsible for reimbursement in the amount of $1,125. Payment is due within 14 days to avoid additional fines. I nearly spit out my coffee. $1,125 for nothing. But the best part? The email was signed, not by the HOA office manager, but by Karen herself. She was literally using official HOA channels to funnel her personal vendetta into something that looked legal. I took a deep breath, opened a new folder on my laptop, and titled it Karen Evidence Legal. I dragged the email into it, along with screenshots of all the voicemails and texts. If she wanted to play dirty, fine. I'd play smart. Around noon, my neighbor, someone I trusted, called me. Hey, he said cautiously, you know anything about a crew of guys standing in front of your house this morning? My chest tightened. What do you mean? They were in trucks with tools. They looked legit, but they were just standing around your porch, kind of confused. I overheard one of them on the phone saying, the homeowner says he never hired us. Then, about 20 minutes later, Karen came strutting over, waving papers in the air, yelling that she was in charge. They left after arguing with her, but she didn't look happy. I exhaled slowly, gripping the phone tighter. That confirmed it. Karen really had dragged contractors into this mess without my consent. And worse, she had tried to impersonate me to get them to do the work. Thanks for letting me know, I told my neighbor. Do me a favor, if anything else happens, take pictures. Videos, too, if you can. I'm building a case. You got it, he said. Honestly, the whole street's tired of her nonsense. You're not the only one she bullies. But you might be the first one actually willing to stand up to her. That gave me a spark of determination. I wasn't alone. Karen might strut around like a dictator, but her reign of terror wasn't invincible. The rest of the afternoon, while I sat in my hotel preparing for my meetings, I couldn't stop thinking about Karen. She'd crossed the line from annoying HOA busybody to criminally reckless. This wasn't just about me anymore. If she was willing to misuse funds and impersonate homeowners, the entire neighborhood was at risk. By evening, I had my plan. Document everything. Every voicemail, every email, every false invoice. Contact the HOA's property management company. Karen wasn't supposed to have unilateral control. Consult an attorney. I needed to know what kind of case I had: fraud, harassment, abuse of authority. Involve law enforcement if necessary. If she really tried to break in or damage my property, it would be time to press charges. As I organized my evidence, a thought crossed my mind. For years, everyone in the neighborhood had whispered about Karen, rolled their eyes, and paid her fines just to avoid trouble. But nobody had ever truly challenged her. Maybe that was why she felt so untouchable. But that was about to change. Before bed that night, I got one final text from her. Mobile phone Karen, don't think you can run from this. You'll be home soon enough, and when you are, I'll be waiting. I stared at it for a moment, then saved the screenshot into my evidence folder. If she wanted a fight, she was going to get one. But this time, it would be on my terms. The day I returned home, I was half expecting to see chaos on my property. Maybe broken locks, maybe scaffolding in my yard, maybe even a crew hammering away under Karen's orders. Instead, what I saw was worse in a different way. There was a bright orange paper taped to my front door: notice of fine, $3,250 due immediately. I pulled it off and read the small print. It accused me of failure to comply with board-approved maintenance work, obstruction of contractors, and dereliction of community standards. At the bottom, in a scrawled signature, was Karen's name, again, not the HOA office manager's. I laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it was so brazenly illegal that it almost felt like a prank. She wasn't even trying to hide the fact that she was making this all up herself. As I carried my bags inside, I noticed my neighbor, Mr. Lopez, standing on his porch, watching. He waved me over. You're not gonna believe this, he said, lowering his voice. Karen's been parading around all week telling everyone you're about to lose your house. Said you refused to cooperate with the HOA, and she was taking steps to replace you with a more responsible owner. She even hinted she had buyers lined up. I stopped in my tracks. Buyers? She was talking about selling my house as if she owned it. That was beyond absurd. That was fraud on a whole new level. Thanks for the heads up, I told him. Trust me, I'm handling it. And I was. That evening, I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and organized everything into neat folders. Karen texts, 32 screenshots. Karen voicemails, 7 saved audio files. HOA emails, 3, all signed by Karen. Fake invoice, $1,125 demand. Fake fine, $3,250 notice. Neighbor statements, 2 written notes from people who saw Karen bring contractors to my house without permission. It was a mountain of evidence. Enough to crush her in a courtroom. The next morning, I called an attorney. After reviewing the material, he actually chuckled. She's practically gift-wrapped this case for you, he said. You've got her on harassment, misuse of HOA authority, attempted fraud, and possibly even extortion. If she really tried to sell your home, or threaten foreclosure, that's a criminal matter. Hearing those words lifted a weight off my chest. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. Karen really had crossed the line into criminal behavior. 2 days later, I attended the HOA board meeting. Normally, only a handful of people showed up, but word must have spread because the room was packed. Karen sat at the head of the table like a queen on her throne, smiling smugly. When she saw me walk in, her smile faltered. "Well, look who finally decided to face the music," she said loudly, making sure the whole room heard. "We've been discussing your blatant disregard for community rules. You owe thousands in fines, and if you can't pay, we'll move forward with enforcement." I didn't sit down. Instead, I placed a thick binder of printed evidence on the table. "Actually, Karen," I said clearly, "we're going to discuss your blatant disregard for the law." The room went silent. I opened the binder and began laying out copies, the threatening texts, the late-night voicemails, the bogus invoices, the fake fine notices. I even had written statements from the contractors themselves, who confirmed they were called out without authorization. Gasps echoed around the room. Board members leaned forward, whispering to each other. Karen's face turned bright red. This is taken out of context," she stammered. "You don't understand how the HOA operates. I was acting in the community's best interest." "No," I cut her off. "You were acting in your own interest. You sent people to my property without permission. You falsified documents. You tried to extort money from me. That's not community service. That's harassment. And here's the best part." I held up a flash drive. "All of this has already been turned over to my attorney. And if necessary, the police." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A couple of board members actually nodded in agreement. Karen tried to regain her composure, but it was slipping through her fingers. "This is slander. You can't just." "It's not slander if it's backed up by evidence," I said calmly. "And trust me, I've got more than enough." One of the quieter board members, a woman named Denise, finally spoke up. "Karen, did you really send contractors to his property without authorization?" Karen sputtered. Well, I was trying to enforce the rules." "That's not enforcement," Denise said firmly. "That's abuse of power. I think we need to hold a vote of no confidence." The room erupted. Neighbors who had been silent victims for years suddenly found their voices. One after another, they shared their own stories: bogus fines, intimidation, harassment. Karen had bullied everyone, and now the floodgates were open. By the end of the meeting, the board voted to suspend Karen from her position pending investigation. She stormed out, shrieking that this was a witch hunt, but no one followed her. The fallout didn't take long. My attorney filed formal complaints with the County Housing Authority and State HOA Oversight Committee. Karen was investigated for fraud and misuse of HOA funds. Within weeks, she was removed from the board entirely. As for me, the fake fines disappeared. The invoices were voided. And for the first time since moving into the neighborhood, I could breathe. The best part was hearing from my neighbors. They thanked me for standing up to her. Many admitted they'd been too scared to fight back before, afraid of the endless fines and threats. But once Karen was gone, it was like the entire street felt lighter. One evening, Mr. Lopez leaned over the fence and grinned. "Guess you're the neighborhood hero now. The guy who finally took down Karen." I laughed. "I'm no hero. I just refused to let her push me around." But deep down, I knew it was bigger than that. Karen had believed she was untouchable, because no one had challenged her. The moment someone stood up, her entire empire crumbled. And now, when my phone buzzes after midnight, I can actually relax, because I know it won't be Karen demanding my keys ever again.